In tonight's headlines, a marathon session continues in the Legislative Council as the Article 23 bill is scrutinized. Police arrest a couple after the bodies of two infants are found in glass cylinders in a Tuen Mun flat. And the deaths of 5 Palestinians in an airdrop mishap prompt calls for aid to Gaza to be delivered more efficiently.
Lawmakers returned to the Legislative Council this morning for the second day of marathon deliberations on the Safeguarding National Security Bill. Under the draft legislation published yesterday, anyone faces 3 years in jail on conviction of possessing documents of incitement in nature and has the intent to commit incitement. That drew the concern of Peter Kuhn.
Let me name an example. There was a newspaper that was very popular that is called Apple Daily. Some people want to keep this kind of newspaper. They could keep a few copies at their home. Does this constitute possession of seditious or publication with seditious intention?
Principal Government Counsel Ivan Leung refused to comment on the now-defunct tabloid, which is undergoing legal proceedings. But in general, he said much depends on whether the defendant was aware that the publication in possession had a seditious intention. Security Minister Chris Tang chipped in, saying people could fall foul of the law, even if the article was published before the bill came into effect. That is exactly my concern, Poon replied, suggesting the possibility of people unknowingly possessing such articles at home. Secretary for Justice Paul Lam insisted the offence is regulated in the existing crimes ordinance and there would be no grandfathering arrangements. Another full day of debate is scheduled tomorrow. Raymond Yang, Cable News. Police rushed to May Hang building in Tuen Mun at around noon yesterday after receiving a report that the bodies of 2 infants were found inside a residential unit. The gruesome discovery was made by a cleaner who was hired by the landlord to tidy up the 400-square-foot home after the tenants were recently evicted.
咁兩具嘅男嬰屍體呢已經送往富山殮房。
Chief Inspector Ao Young Tak of the New Territories North Crime Unit said the 2 baby boys were stored in 2 glass cylinders measuring 30 centimeters in height and soaked in liquid. The bottles were left on the floor in the living room. There were no visible wounds on the bodies, according to a brief inspection by forensic pathologists. An autopsy would be carried out today to determine the infant's age and cause of death. Just hours after the case came to light, police arrested a 24-year-old man and a woman aged 22 in Yau Ma Tei. The man, a warehouse worker, is said to have a triad background, while the woman worked in public relations. The pair are believed to be the parents of the babies and had lived in the flat since December 2022. They are being held on suspicion of preventing the lawful burial of a body, as police try to find out a motive. Raymond Yang, Cable News. Hong Kong's tourism minister says the highest bidder doesn't always win. Kevin Yeung was responding to Singapore's aggressive campaign to secure exclusive rights to Taylor Swift concerts. In an interview with RTHK, Yeung played down suggestions that the SAR needs to follow suit by offering financial incentives to land pop stars and performers. He added that many factors are at play on the organizers' end, including their target audience and sponsors. Yeung is deputy chairman of the Mega Events Coordination Group, which met for the first time yesterday. Without going into details, he said the task force is already working in full swing to lure more mega events to the city. He is also hopeful that the completion of the Kai-Tak Sports Park will give authorities an edge in future negotiations. Five Palestinians in northern Gaza were crushed to death and 11 injured when the parachute of a large food parcel failed to open. The tragedy prompted relief agencies to demand that aid be rushed to the besieged enclave by land. Airdrops, they said, can only feed a small number of the over 2 million Palestinians trapped in Gaza. A U.S. plan to build a temporary pier to deliver supplies by sea is expected to take about 10 weeks. More than 700,000 Palestinians are facing extreme hunger, and over 20 have already starved to death after Israel blocked food supplies and restricted aid convoys. Israeli airstrikes continued to kill more Palestinians. At least 8 people, including 1 child, died, and dozens were injured in an attack in central Gaza. Almost 31,000 Palestinians, mostly women and children, have been killed since Israel began retaliating for a Hamas attack in October.
As Muslims around the world prepare to observe the holy fasting month of Ramadan, Palestinians in Gaza are bracing for a trying time. Relentless Israeli bombings have destroyed most of the mosques in the besieged enclave. About 1,000 mosques have been reduced to rubble, forcing Palestinians to pray next to demolished places of worship. You feel sadness when you see houses of God destroyed and piled up in ruins, said prayer leader Muhammad Abu Mustafa. But he said their faith remains steadfast. Ramadan begins tomorrow, and Palestinians vowed to observe the holy month as best as they can, despite the loss of their mosques and homes and a looming famine. We have no fear of warplanes and missiles hitting mosques, said Abdul Halim Zanoon. We will still come to pray. Palestinians in East Jerusalem are also concerned. Israeli police have been preventing them from entering the Al-Aqsa Mosque for Friday prayers. They prayed on the streets nearby instead. Now they are worried that the denial of access to one of Islam's holiest shrines will continue during Ramadan. They spoke about making things easier, but it's not true, said Ehab Tabu. They are not making it easier, they are increasing the restrictions. Sachin Katwi, Cable News.
The United Nations has marked International Women's Day with an appeal to speed up gender equality.
At our current rate of change, full legal equality for women is some 300 years away. So is the end of child marriage. And by 2030, over 340 million women and girls will still be living in extreme poverty, some 18 million more than men and boys. This is an insult to women and girls.
Women marched in major cities to press for equal rights, among other demands. In Madrid, protesters denounced the sexual exploitation of women and violence against them. In Kabul, a small group of defiant women staged a rare protest in the Afghan capital. They castigated the ruling Taliban for restricting their rights. In Gaza, it was another day of suffering. We Palestinian women have no rights at all, said Iman Abu Maksib. She was rescued from under the rubble of her building after it was destroyed in an Israeli attack. Her 2 daughters are missing, presumed dead. Palestinian women say those who survived Israel's onslaught are left as widows and without children.
More than 9,000 women have been killed in Gaza, and this must stop. We cannot return to a path to peace without justice for all survivors of this conflict. And I say all survivors of this conflict. and without an end to the indiscriminate violence in Gaza.
Consumer prices in China rose in February, ending 6 months of decline. The consumer price index grew by 0.7% from a year ago, beating market expectations. Prices are normally higher during the Lunar New Year, which fell in February this year. Economists believe that deflationary pressure is still not over, as the producer price index dropped by 2.7% last month. It was the 17th month in a row that the benchmark which measures factory prices retreated.